This first thing is in Chicago, but it's in other places, but one of the biggest ones is in Chicago. A rabbi named Fournier runs a temple there, and I'm going to show you a news clip from it so you'll get an idea. This is more properly categorized as Black Judaism. However, since they still think they're Israelites, it falls under the broad umbrella under Hebrewism. But the class today won't be dealing with this, but I'm showing you this to understand there's a pretty broad umbrella. So let's watch this little video real quick here with Fournier on the south side.
Most people feel that Europeans are the true Jews, but that's not true. We, the people who descend from the Africans, in particular the Ethiopians, are the true Israelites. We are the true Jews.
There are going to be some expressions of nationalism that sometimes people find maybe a little offensive and stuff like that, but you have to understand that down through the years, we have been the one on the outside.
What you saw there was Beth Shalom. It's here in Chicago, and it's essentially Black Judaism, right? And the important thing there in that clip, why I showed it, is because you still have some key ideas that are going to pop up later. Number one, did you hear when she said most people feel the Europeans are the true Jews? So first of all, that's wrong. Let me explain real quick what I mean by that. It's true that there is a diaspora of ethnic Jews, right? And it's true that some of the people who were dispersed went through mainly Eastern Europe. And so they come out on the other side looking sort of like their neighbors. But they didn't just go there. They went to Spain and Morocco and Yemen. Google, if you want to have some fun, Yemeni Jews. They don't look like Seinfeld and Woody Allen. They look like Yemenis. So the Sephardic Jews also. So it's sort of a straw man that she's talking about in the first place. Europeans are true Jews. No, it's true that some Jews went through Eastern Europe, but most Jews don't even look, even the modern era, and definitely in the first century didn't look like that, because the dispersal, you intermarry and all that, has folks looking most certainly different than they did way back then. But again, it's just not Ashkenazi Jews. That's what she's referring to there. But notice how it's not just we're true Israelites or Jews too, it's they're not the true Jews. That's what you're going to see again in a displacement. And again, this is all about ethnicity. And if you're Reformed like I am, this is not relevant because you have a covenantal view, and so you don't even see it as a big deal. But even we should understand, no matter what your position is, when you read Romans 9, not all who are Israel, right? And so what does being ethnically Jewish get you as far as salvation? Nothing really, right? But nonetheless, this is the project of Hebrewism in part, but we're going to find out why. I'm going to show you. We already kind of showed this, but I'm just bringing those up to show you. I've actually debated this camp that's engaging in the bootlicking. I've actually debated them a few times. So if you go on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Vocab Malone, you'll see 2 debates. And I labeled them this way because they were very calm and respectful, even though these gentlemen are not always calm and respectful. But just look those up and you'll see some interesting stuff. So here's why this matters. There's a problem in community, and they have a solution. They say black people need laws, not religion. And so it's a legalistic, moralistic solution to the problems. They'll say, we got to keep these laws, statutes, and commandments. That's a common phrase. In fact, if you heard the Kendrick Lamar album, when there's a man on the voice message machine leaving a recording or whatever, he says laws, statutes, and commandments. It's viewed as a way to get back to your true heritage by keeping the laws, statutes, and commandments. And then, of course, it used to be you just have a bunch of young men primarily, but now we got second and third generation Hebrew Israelites. But it's not gospel. Very rarely do you run into a Hebrew Israelite who understands the gospel. And in fact, a lot of the more militant Hebrew Israelites will say the gospel is to be synonymous with glad tidings. And when you go to the Old Testament and look for the word glad tidings, you actually see this news about Israel's going to kick the other nations' butt. So what's the gospel? Some of the Hebrew Israelites will say it's glad tidings. What are the glad tidings? That we're going to rule over our oppressor physically. So they'll actually sometimes even identify the gospel as that way. But the gospel is Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures. Now that's bare bones, but that's a start. And they usually don't even get that or any of these kinds of scriptures right, because it's not a gospel-based religion. And yet the Bible says that it's pratos, meaning the most important or the first thing. Now, here's what I hope you guys come away with today. I'm going to introduce you to the wide variations within Hebrew Israelism. I'm going to demonstrate the attraction and appeal. So I don't want you to leave just thinking, oh my goodness, this is crazy. I want you to also leave saying, I get why people are doing this. I also want you to get some idea of some of the regional distinctives. So a lot of the clips I'm going to show are actually Chicago-based Hebrew Israelites. And then I want to expose the legalistic, bigoted, unbiblical, polemical, paranoid, and heretical nature of Hebrew Israelite doctrine. And lastly, where'd it go? I got carried away. To challenge Christians, to engage their cities with the gospel of Jesus Christ. I just cannot get it on. That's all right, we have fun. I'm not qualified, but I'm fun. What is Hebrew Israelism? Here's a definition. A connected web of religious beliefs and practices predicated on the claim that peoples of African descent living in the Western Hemisphere are the physical descendants of ancient Israelites. So I wanted to have a little bit of fun. So I put this definition up on my Instagram and wanted to see what Hebrew Israelites would say about it, because I knew that some of them would have a problem. And I'll just read. So here's I am King Supreme. That's his handle. And here's, because I said, correct my definition, Hebrew Israelites, if it's wrong. And he says, 1, it's not religious. 2, we ain't African. 3, it ain't a prediction, it's a historical text that white men lied about. 4, we scattered all over. 5, we are the bloodline, our lineage that makes us Israelites. Our physical characteristics is what sets us apart from the imposters, that's the fake Jews, and Africans. So, you were like, hold up, I like Vocab's definition better, because it made sense. Let me explain what he was saying here. He's saying this is not a religion, it's simply understanding your ethnic identity. That's what he means by it's not a religion. Although they keep the feasts, or they try. They do the festival of booths with tents that they got from Walmart. They don't really keep it, but they'll say they keep it. So it is religious, though, clearly. 2, we ain't African. What's up with that? I'm still a little hot. If it's just a tad down, maybe. It's saying there that we're Israelites, not African. They'll constantly say we're Shemites or Semites, not Hamites. So there's an anti-African strand in a lot of Hebrew Israelism. Now, not all of it. Remember the rabbinical Jews? They said we're descended from Ethiopians specifically, so they don't even really go to the west coast of Africa. They're talking about Ethiopians, because there are Falasha there who probably are descended, at least in part, from Israelites way back in the day. So the black Jews, the follow Judaism in the beginning were pointing to the Ethiopians, but most Hebrew Israelites you see in the corner don't do that. They trace it to the west coast of Africa using Deuteronomy 28, which is the next thing he said. He said, it ain't a prediction, it's a historical text that white men lied about. So what he's talking about there is Deuteronomy 28. That's their main passage they would go to. And does anyone have a Bible? Someone could turn there and read it? Could someone go to Deuteronomy 28:68? I want to have someone else read it. That'd be fun. And you could, if you want to read it like a Hebrew Israelite, I'm just kidding, man. But Deuteronomy 28:68. So listen to what this says, and this is what he's saying. He's saying it's not a prediction, but notice in my definition, I didn't have the word prediction. This is another challenge in dealing with Hebrew Israelites, and I'm not trying to be funny, is a common misunderstanding of words that you use. So I said predicated, he thought I was saying predicted. You see what I'm saying? I'm saying that this is the base assumption from which their other beliefs flow. You got Deuteronomy 28:68. They would actually use the KJV because it translates it slightly different. The KJV is a little imprecise, but they like the way it reads better because it reads a little bit better for them. But then when it says buyer, they'll say that means, they'll say that buyer means to be redeemed. So buyer doesn't mean bought with money. It means to be saved. It's saying there will be no one there to save you. That's how they do that. So they take physical ships to a figurative Egypt. You see that? Now, because the Egypt is not actual Egypt, even though in that passage of Deuteronomy 28, right there it mentions Egypt 2 other times, and both times it's referring to Egypt. You'll say the boils of Egypt or something like that. But that's the key passage. And if you listen to, for example, the Kendrick Lamar album, what does his cousin drop on the answering machine? Deuteronomy 28. That's the key passage to reel people in. And so that's what this guy is talking about in Instagram. Thanks, you did a good job. Don't convert. So And then number 4 says we're scattered all over, because what he's saying by that is we're not just in the United States of America. The reason why, though, I put that in the Western Hemisphere is because not all Hebrew Israelites agree with that. Some believe some were left on the west coast of Africa. Others believe there's folks in Jamaica. Others believe it's only the United States. There's different variations. That's why Western Hemisphere covers it, and then other beliefs flow from that. So this is a good definition, but then there's other things that different groups will believe based upon it. But you see the key thesis. Now, if this was all Hebrew Israelism was, wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it's a lot more than that, because where it says connected webs and beliefs and practices, all the stuff that comes along with it is usually heretical. That's the problem. Let me demonstrate. First, some history is in order. What are the 4 main growth phases of Hebrew Israelism? 1 is during Reconstruction. So post-Civil War, right? 1892, a man named William Crowdy. That church is still around. He was a former cook on a train in Santa Fe, but then he was in the Midwest at this other time, but at this point, and he had a vision while he was out in the field working that he was an actual blood descendant Israelite. Now, think about it. The old songs, right? They make sort of a metaphorical spiritual connection with the Israelites, don't they? But this is sort of taking that to a literal physical conclusion. That's the first phase. But the folks we're talking about today aren't these guys. These guys aren't on the corner. These guys, I don't want to say they're irrelevant, but mainly what they do is they make like gospel albums with their music and stuff. So we're not really talking about the group started by Crowdy, even though in 1896 he's really one of the first people that we see bringing this out. Now, if you want to learn more about that, though, this book is a little book. It's kind of expensive, but it depends how deep you want to go. But it's actually all about that original church. The Church of God and Saints of Christ, The Rise of Black Jews, Eli Wienia. I mean, you can tell by the cover, it's kind of an academic book, right? But this book is super dope. It actually talks about what the ethnicities of a lot of the folks who were kidnapped were, actually. Do you know the Bible in the Old Testament gives the death penalty for kidnapping? You guys know that? Yeah. So I mean, that's a slave trade right there. But here you have a lot of the actual ethnicities based upon records and regions they came from. Pretty interesting book. So it's just basically learning the truth about it, of who the different ethnic groups were in West Africa versus the Hebrew Israelites version. So second growth phase of Hebrew Israelism, Great Migration. People from the South went north, kind of post-World War I there. In 1919, something came about called the Commandment Keepers. That is a picture of the Commandment Keepers under Rabbi Matthews. And this group is important. Now, you can tell they're essentially practicing rabbinical Judaism. They're more similar to the Beth Shalom folks. The reason why I'm bringing them up, though, is because the groups that we're dealing with now came out of here in their history. There's some good books on that. Judaizing Movements by Tudor Parfit. Anything by him is good. Now, again, these are unbelievers who just document the history, but there's still some good stuff. And there's another book by Tudor Parfit there. So if you want to go deep, I got a good bibliography for you. Third phase, Civil Rights Era. 1969 begins the ISUPK, and that's the mother of all the groups we're dealing with, and the African Hebrew Israelites of Jerusalem. A bunch of folks on the south side of Chicago left and actually moved to Dimona, Israel. And to this day, there's 3,000 to 5,000 folks who live in a place they call the Village of Peace in Dimona. Amari Stoudemire has been associated with it. When Whitney Houston was alive, she went over there and talked to the leader, a man named Ben Ami. He's dead now, but that's them. Again, we're not dealing with them because they're in Israel. They're no longer in Chicago. But this is the beginning of it. Notice again, all these periods of time, what do they have in common? I didn't hear what you said. Yeah, these are times of social transition, racial upheavals. You notice these times? That's when they hit their growth spurts. So guess what? We're in the fourth growth spurt. I'm going to show you that in a second. But first, let me talk a little bit about this history of this group. Hold on. Okay. So, you know what? I played that clip the other class, so I'm going to skip that clip because I'm going to show different clips than I showed, and that one's not entirely relevant. So let me skip this. All right. So this is a man named Abba Bivins. He began preaching right around World War I or so in Harlem primarily. And he was at the Commandment Keepers, right? Let's talk a little bit about Abba Bivins. Apparently, he's from the South. An ex-slave told him that he was an Israelite. He believed that message, took it with him when he went to the South, joined the Commandment Keepers because they also believed that message. It was under Rabbi Matthews, as I mentioned earlier. Today, the Commandment Keepers are basically just a handful of people, hardly anybody left. But he left the school because of the rabbinic-esque nature of it and because it was Torah or Tanakh only. He began something, though, 1969, called the Israelite School of Torah. There's the address up there. It was in Harlem. All this stuff is in Harlem. He was in Harlem until he was actually killed, murdered by some Muslims that he had a verbal dispute with on the street. No one is sure if they were NOI or Sunni, but everyone knows that it was Muslims, every Hebrew Israelite. That's the tale that they tell. So what happens? Does the school fold? What happens? We have this kind of new thing. It's not the Commandment Keepers. What happens? Well, I'm going to tell you the origins of onewest Hebrewism. Now I'm introducing a phrase there, onewest. I'll explain why in a second. 1973, Arya Kwab began the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. In the late 70s, four more very important men came, Lahab, Shar, Yeshaya, Chazak. They formed the seven heads. I'm going to show pictures, so it's not just going to be words. So hold on, you can see some outfits here. There's Yaquab. So he was in the Commandment Keepers, was a student of Abba Bivins, left. He is now dead. His son is Arya, and there's Mashah. Arya is he's still alive, and he's still in a camp. He's like kind of the elder statesman of Hebrew Israelism of the onewest variety. The reason I'm using the term onewest is because they were at a school at onewest 125th Street in Harlem, so it's called onewest Hebrew Israelism. There's another man, General Lahab. He's today a oneness Pentecostal Christian, so he's not a Hebrew Israelite. Well, he still thinks he's an Israelite, but he's no longer affiliated with the camps. So I'm showing you Applebees because that's where the school used to be, but now it's an Applebees. But Applebees couldn't afford it, so now it's being sold. That is onewest 125th, where they all trace their roots back to as far as the guys we're talking about. So, recap. Abba Bivins leaves Commandment Keepers, takes people with him, two of his most important students, Arya and Mashah, who are said to be the reincarnation of John the Revelator and King David. Yes, you heard right. From there's further breakdowns. ICUPK in the House of David. GMS, who are at Chicago, down at State and Adams, downtown, every Saturday. And so I'm going to go talk to them tomorrow. So see the GMS group, that's Elder Tahar. He's not going to be there, but his other GMS camp members will be. IUIC, who are out by one of the train stations on 95th or 96 every Saturday. Not Elder Nate, that's him, but the guys in purple and gold, that's IUIC. House of Israel, they're more New York based under a man named Zabak. The ICGJC, they're primarily in Philly and New York. I don't know if they have a camp in Chicago. I have not heard yet. But ISUPK, who broke off of them, most certainly does. I'll show you some video clip of them later on. The GOCC also has affiliates here. I'll also show you a clip of them. That's Elder Ricard. That's the man who received a spanking by a Christian apologist a couple years back in a debate. If you ever saw, I don't literally mean spanking everyone. I mean, it was a debate. And clearly, Elder Ricard did not know what he was talking about. So, review again. There's a name change in the 80s from what it was to the Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge. In the mid-90s, a lot of splits. Year 2000, they predicted Jesus was going to come back. He didn't, so there's further splits. Currently led by Tazadakia, who says he is the personal physical manifestation of the Holy Spirit. How y'all doing out there? There's what Arya looks like today. He's a little bit older, and you don't hear from him much anymore. So he's not as relevant, although he is the one who came up with their special language. If you notice when they speak Hebrew, it's Arya, Tazadakia, Katazah. That sounds like a lot of A sounds. What about other words in Hebrew? Well, they teach that this is the correct way to pronounce Hebrew. They take Paleo-Hebrew and add their own speculative vocalizations based upon Arya's guesswork. And that's the kind of Hebrew they use. They see that modern Hebrew is actually Yiddish, but modern Hebrew is Hebrew, and Yiddish is not modern Hebrew. It's two different things, but that's what they call it. That's why they speak differently than actual Hebrew. So if you speak Hebrew to them, they won't know what you're saying. So they don't say shalom, they say shalom. See what I'm saying? Yep, not joking. All right. Fourth phase of growth is what we maybe might call the woke era. Don't have a great name for it yet. Kind of 2007, big bump. 2015, another big bump. So this is the current era we're dealing with. More militant, more social media savvy, more present on the street. And this is what, and it's no joke. It's growing. In class today, we taught the class earlier. It's crazy how many people in there had a family member involved. It wasn't a good look. A couple of other good books I recommend. One called The Round Table. It has a story of a Hebrew Israelite. And Black Man's Religion, not a fan of the cover, but it's a great book. Can Christianity be Afrocentric? There's the chart one more time. Memorize it and I'll give you a free book. Okay, now let's show you some video footage because I want to really show you what we're talking about here. I'm not gonna let me skip some of these. These are all pictures of men in Chicago, by the way, the ISUPK there. So you get a view of how they look. They go out and speak at the festivals like the Bantu Festival. Here's a lecture that General Yohana gave in Chicago called Black Supremacy. There's IUIC. They're Israel United in Christ. I'm going to show some stuff of them later. That's the purple and gold guys. You guys might have seen them. So you guys are like, wait a minute. They're racist. What's that white guy doing going camping with them? Well, GOCC teaches that white people can be grafted in as brothers as long as they don't teach. So he's considered a brother in GOCC. He just can't teach anybody. So the camps have different beliefs. So even though you're doing this class, when you meet a Hebrew Israelite, don't assume they're okay with bootlicking. Don't assume they won't go camping with white guys, because they might. You just don't know until you start asking. But this class should give you the foundation from which to ask good questions. That's what I'm hoping. Oh yeah, hold on. Oh, this is good. I want to show this because it's mundane. What I mean by that is, out in the streets, kind of sensationalistic in a sense, right? But they spend a lot of time in class. Now, what's happening is the main leader of GOCC is coming to Chicago. Why is he coming to Chicago? Because Chicago's growing. So he's having a baptism. The only camp that practices water baptism, and I'm not saying they're Christians just because they do it, but the only one that does it is GOCC. So he's going to take some Q&A, and I want to show you how normal these folks are in the class and how diverse they are as he answers the questions. So just analyze this and start to understand the appeal. These are not just strange folks. These are middle-class folks getting wrapped up. Now watch what they say. All right, here we go.
We only set up things according to scriptures. The apostleship, the members of the body, the operation of the saints, everything is according to the Bible. Everything. There's nothing that we're doing that you can't go into the Bible and find. Now, what I challenge people to do is to look at what's going on in the churches and see if they can find that in the Bible. That's my challenge. I need you to go into this Bible and show me Christmas. Show me Sunday worship. These are the things we're being attacked for. You understand? These are the things we're being attacked for. So, we'll see. And welcome anyway.
Thank you.
Second rule, we've been baptized, raise your hand. All right, sister, you can stand up, give me your name, if you don't mind.
Carissa Hill, and I'm from I live in Illinois, but we're from the St. Louis region. And found you on the internet, shook me, found the Hyatt video, and just I probably watched every video I could find every day for 3 or 4 months. Then I joined the academy. I'm just here, so it's the truth.
Your name again?
Carissa.
Okay, what's your walk?
What does that mean?
Where were you before that? Where were you?
Oh, Seeking the Truth. I was actually part of the Living Church of God.
Okay.
And,
one more person, because we'll leave, and then we're going to talk on near the water, okay? Oh, come on, Bill. You still up? I'm not going to I see your hand raised. Come on, sir. Give us your story.
My name is Dominic Garcia. Mexican. Issachar.
You notice how he said Issachar? Do you guys hear that? My reader, can you turn to Genesis 49? I'm sorry, you did. If you're cool with it, you did a good job. I'm going to explain real quick what's going on. First of all, notice how the men and the women sit separate. Anyone catch that? Not necessarily, going to send anyone to hell. I'm just saying, just notice. But what do you notice about this group of people? Look like a bunch of crazy people? No? The guy teaching the class for car seems kind of nice, right? Seems family. You notice the lady says, I saw a video and I just kept on watching it, and I don't think you caught it, but she said the Ahia video. Ahia is how they pronounce God's name. So she saw a video where he supposedly is giving the true name of God, Ahia, and that shook her. Did you hear that? So one video, watching one video, this person who's raised Christian, you hear her journey, right? One video on the name of God shakes, and in the next 3 to 4 months, watches every video she can find. And then travel from St. Louis just to get baptized. My point is, this is affecting normal folks now. It's not just people who are upset, the young guy in the corner, right? And what's going to happen is, if I could make a prediction, almost everyone in this room, if they don't know a Hebrew Israelite, they have any connection at all to the city, you're gonna meet somebody. It might be your barber, your beautician. You're gonna start meeting somebody like, hey, you know our people's true lineage? Come at you with something like that. Hey, you celebrate Christmas? They come at you, and you'll be like, oh, Jehovah's Witness. Might not make a Jehovah's Witness, right? Now, let's look at Genesis chapter 49. In this chapter, Jacob gathers his sons around him, right? And he gives sort of little miniature characterizations of each of the sons, right? And I want to show you this verse because this man said he was Issachar, correct? Now he's Chicano. That means Mexican, for those of you not in Phoenix. I'm going to show you why they call him Issachar. Brother, could you please read verse 14 and 15 of Genesis 49?
Who in our country is treated like a beast of burden right now?
Who takes a nap in the middle of the day called a siesta? Who comes from a beautiful, pleasant land in our country? Who bears loads and yet is seen as a forced laborer, sometimes illegally, even now in our country? Issachar, the so-called Mexicans, they take a siesta, a 2-hour nap after lunch, and it's right here. He saw that his resting place was good. You see that? Now, that's really how they say, if you're on the 12 tribes chart, you're Issachar, you're Mexican, that's where they get it from. Now, they have a fuller breakdown they could do. Does that sound like eisegesis to you? But they think it's the truth. And so that's where the 12 tribes come from. It's from Genesis 49. So the two most important passages to understand dealing with onewest Hebrew Israelite, I don't mean as far as the understanding of the gospel. That's different. But as far as two key things to them for how they function would be Genesis 49 and Deuteronomy 28. Those are two key ones there to understand. Now, I'm going to stop there because it was a lot. When I sat down over there, I realized, man, I'm going fast. So I'm trying to slow it down a little bit. And I'm going to open up for some Q&A right now before I show this next video, because I know it's a lot to take in. Any questions or comments about anything said so far, or something you're hoping we get to? Anything like that? Anybody? Yes, sir. Well, so does everyone know what is in Genesis 10? If you could take a scan of it real quick, I'm going to explain your question real quick. For those of you who couldn't hear, he's saying it's on the Western Hemisphere. What about Asians? Fantastic question, right? Well, they don't only do a 12 tribes chart breakdown according to Genesis 49. They also do a Genesis 10 table of nations breakdown. And so every group of people on the planet, they believe, can be biblically identified. So if you're Japanese, you're an Ammonite. If you're Chinese, you're a Moabite. And they utilize that to explain how they should deal with you. So Asians are not included on the 12 tribes chart. They are not considered one of God's elect people under onewest Hebrewism. Asians actually will be one of the nations that will be slaves in the kingdom. So that's the way they look at it. Yeah, that's how they deal with it. Now it gets a little weird. I'm gonna tell you something weird. Every now and then you may think, let's say you go home, watch some videos by Hebrew Israelites, and you see a guy who looks kind of Asian in there. Two things: he could be mixed, could be on his father's side, and they'll accept that if it's on the father's side only. Let's say, Puerto Rican on one side, Asian on, okay. That could be that. Or certain camps, specifically GMS, the Great Millstone Israelites, teach a subjective epistemology. Now, that's not the word they use, obviously, but meaning an internal system almost that lets you know, no matter what your phenotype is, how you look, whether you're an Israelite or not. Because there's the diaspora. Everyone goes everywhere. So these groups of Hebrew Israelites will say, no matter what you look like, you could be an Israelite if you believe this teaching. And we agree because GMS believes they can read spirits. They'll say the spirit of the prophet is subject to the prophets, right? That verse, they'll use that because they believe they're prophets to say, I can tell if you're an Israelite. And I'll be real honest with you. Most of the time when they say you're an Israelite, it's basically by and large, two things. Do you agree with the teaching and do you have a little bit of swag? That's usually how it goes. I'm not joking. Usually when they'll say, oh, he is an Israelite, and it's clearly someone not on their chart, you're like, you're just saying that because the dude has a little swag. They don't read, anyways. But so if you have a little bit of swag, maybe one of them will read your spirit and say you're an Israelite. But if not, you're going into chains. Yeah, right. That's a good observation, though. Now let me show this next thing. This is also GOCC. First of all, notice how long he's going to be out here. I'm not going to show the whole 3-hour video. I'm going to show little clips from afternoon till dark. Secondly, notice how conspiracy-laden this video I'm about to show you is. It is absolutely filled with some of those bizarre conspiracy theories I've ever heard. And yet he's convinced, eloquent, and passionate about it. Secondly, notice how people were listening to him in downtown Chicago. He's down by the library, by the way. So he was coming in from Chicago, and when he did the baptisms, and he also did some teaching. So this is downtown Chicago, Elder Ricard, GOCC. The last book, the reason I show that is because from Babylon to Timbuktu, you used to have to order it, find it in specialist places. Now, you go what's the last remaining bookstore? Barnes & Noble, right? You go into Barnes & Noble, go to African American Studies, at least 3 copies. Every time I go to Barnes & Noble, I see at least 3 or 4 copies of Babylon to Timbuktu. It's yellow. You recognize it says Windsor on it. That means something, right? Now, that book is almost like their second Bible. It's really bad on the history. If you read it, you'll be like, what? Now, I didn't bring it, but just to give you a flavor of Hebrew Israelite books, I did bring a book. Hebrew Israelite by 5 Undeniable Proofs by Dr. Trevor Udenis. Now, I'm going to pass this book around. So for the bored people, you can look at this book instead while I'm speaking. But I just want to give you a flavor because guess what? They make books too. So just pass this around like an offering plate and check it out and just make sure it gets back to me and just check it out as long as you want, right? So let's talk about these clips, right? Do you notice he quoted Revelation 18? Babylon has fallen. So they can't decide, is America the new Egypt, house of bondage, or is it Babylon? Well, it's both, according to the Hebrew Israelite schema. It's Babylon. So Revelation 18 is a prophecy of America falling, right? So that's why they call it Babylon. And they also believe that all the religions that people hold to are Babylonian. That's why they say the holidays are actually ceremonies designed to get us to practice ancient Babylonian religion. A lot of this comes out of an old book called The Two Babylons, which has essentially been thoroughly debunked. It's not a good book, but they utilize that with From Babylon to Timbuktu. And my favorite part is where he points to the gargoyles and says those are for sacrifices. And I don't know what actually he was talking about with the Jewish sorcerer in the top of the supermarket just receiving energies. But this shows you the nature of the conspiracy theory. Now, just stop for a second, though, and check this out. Just think, if you've been lied to, by the FBI and the CIA and maybe your church and maybe your schools, and before that, your parents and grandparents were lied to and lied about, right? It just makes you more inclined to believe these kinds of things because you don't feel like you can trust power structures and institutions. You know what I'm saying? And so this may sound insane, but you're more susceptible because you see that there's a lot of times been wicked powers behind the powers that are out there. You see what I'm saying? And so this stuff sounds a little more believable when you're in basically that mentality, and there's a historical reason for it. Now, I'm not justifying it, right? But I'm just trying to get you to understand a little bit about it. But do you guys have any comments on this? Because I just gave you a taste of GOCC in downtown Chicago. Yes, sir. A cousin who's a Hebrew Israelite in New York? Okay. Is he an IUIC, purple and gold? Virginia's hot with camps. What's not have issues with it. They believe it's canonical. Yeah. No, some of what you're saying, so some of that. So some of the camps believe the Nephilim were ancient, like black Jewish, like superstar people. Others believe they were like, kind of like what you're saying. A lot of people believe white people came from albinism. Others believe through leprosy. And you mentioned the things of like literal devils. I'll tell you about that. Now, I don't know exactly which thing your guy's going with, but I'll tell you a little bit about one of the onewest versions of the origin of white folks, right? So in the garden, you have the snake speaking to Adam and Eve, right? And when he speaks to them, he says, eat of the apple. They say the snake is actually a white man, a proto-Edomite is what they'll actually refer to him as. And that the snake is telling Adam and Eve to engage in relationships with the other nations. You may say, what other nations? Well, what they do is they go to passages in the Bible that refer to trees poetically as people, or vice versa, where they refer to trees anthropomorphized or whatever, such as a righteous man is like a tree planted by the water. And then they'll say, so trees can mean people. And they'll say Adam was surrounded by trees, meaning Adam was surrounded by the other nations. Remember when he came and said, Adam, where are you? Where was he? He was hiding among the bushes. He was trying to hide out among the other nations. By the way, this is what I'm telling you is all what they believe. And so then from Satan, the proto-Edomite, he ends up being able to reproduce actually Cain, another proto-Edomite. And then from Cain, you get this wicked line of people all the way to the modern day white person. A lot of times they'll also associate it with there's somewhere along the way of Neanderthals. They'll say, what did the old school Edomites look like? And they'll show a picture of the Geico caveman commercial. This is true stuff. And so Esau, though, is their main Edomite, because in the Bible, Esau is the father of Edomites, right? So when it comes to Esau, and that's why sometimes they'll just say, look at Esau. And they're just saying, look at that white guy. They'll say, okay, white people love to hunt. They'll sit in trees and wait for hours and hours to get a deer or something. And they'll say that that's characteristic of Esau, because if you read Esau, that's what he did. And they love to show pictures of hairy white guys. So white guys with beards and hairy arms and hairy backs, because they say that's a descendant of Esau, unlike the black man whose skin is smooth usually. And then since Esau was red, right? They love to show pictures of sunburnt white people and say, look at Esau being red. Look at Esau right there, so-called white man. You're not even white. You don't even know that. You're red. Yeah. I bet you like to hunt. How many guns you have? Yes, Esau. See, that's Esau. I don't even have to look at you. That's actually what they say. They'll ask white people how many guns they own, because they love to hunt. And if you think I'm joking, there's a debate with a guy named Josh White, so not James White, but in ISUPK. And in the debate, he spends about 10 minutes asking about what guns he owns and he likes to hunt to prove he's Esau. So this is what happens, right? So there's some of that. Now see, you got this guy, he's just kind of getting into it. So he's getting taught. And so he's probably someone you can talk to now. But if he stays in this and you get him when he's 25, it's going to be hard, man. It's going to be real hard. Because ultimately, it turns a non-bigoted person into a bigot, and it justifies their bigotry with the Bible. Let me show you how. Doesn't Romans 9 say, Jacob I have loved and Esau I have hated? So if you approach them and you say, well, your doctrine's really racist. They're like, God's a racist. Romans 9, read. You see what I'm saying? Because they say, you know who Esau is? The father of the white man. Now, if you're Reformed, I think you have a great answer for Romans 9 through 11. If you're not, good luck. Go watch Leighton Flowers. I'm just teasing. Say what? Go ahead, man. And more people feel that way nowadays. Let me give you a true story. Now, if you're not empathetic, you might want to laugh at this, but be empathetic. I asked the Hebrew Israelite one time, how did you come into this, And he said, well, there was yet, this is how he described it, there was yet another cop shooting, someone who was unarmed, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I went on the Google search bar and I typed in the search bar, why are black people suffering in America? And one of the first things that came up were mainly Hebrew Israelite videos explaining the problem. Man, now he was a radical Hebrew Israelite because of that. So that's a real thing. I mean, imagine, first of all, you know, what a thing that people's just epistemology is such that they go to Google to ask a question like that, but that's where he went, and that's the answer, and now he's a Hebrew Israelite. So it's a real thing, man. But I'll tell you what, you know, I hear what you're saying. My guess is if you probed deeper, you might find some of your cousin's beliefs maybe a little more troubling than you realize, because a lot of times they can kind of sound a certain way, but when you really get into it, you'll see it.
Now you want more? Holidays is a sacrifice to Moloch. A lot of people don't know that Easter is Babylonian, Christmas is Babylonian, Thanksgiving is Babylonian. As a matter of fact, I went to a supermarket a few days before Thanksgiving, and there was a Jewish sorcerer at the top of the supermarket in his office with a cube over his head, praying over all the people that was shopping in his market, taking all of their energy to his God. The Jewish powers, they're the synagogue of Satan. And when you shop and operate on these holy days, it's empowering the demons and the devils and the spirits that control this earth. The same way the Most High gave us holy days, which connects us to the Father, these holidays connect all people everywhere to Satan. Santa Claus, you scramble the word, you got what? Satan's clause. In agreement with Satan. Babylon the Great is fallen. You can't tell me it's not Babylonian. Look at all the constructs. Even look at this witchcraft on top of this building here. What's this? Gargoyles and shrines for sacrifice. Place of Babylonian altars, right? Look up there. Yeah, read on.
Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen.
It's fallen, and what?
It has become the habitation of devils.
So if you're asking me Hebrews as a national origin, Hebrew was never a national origin. It was a language. But we were the Israelites that spoke Hebrew. Okay? Now let me show you prophetically how we know, and we're going to show through history.
Right, that's what I'm getting to history.
Okay, let's do history first.
Okay. I hate you with the Bible scripture. I'm not
Okay.
here with the Bible scripture.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me give you the history first. And then after the history, I'll show you that the Bible confirms that history. Is that fair?
That's fine.